Can you imagine losing a Formula One race on the first lap without having broken practically anything visible in the car? Because that was exactly what happened to Lewis Hamilton in Miami 2026. And the most shocking thing was not the touch, but what the engineers revealed seconds later. The SF26 was already completely compromised, with no possible solution. How is it possible that invisible damage causes you to lose tenths on each lap? And why did Ferrari know from the start that the race was over? What they discovered completely changes the way we understand these cars. The 2026 Miami Grand Prix had not even finished its first lap when Lewis Hamilton's career was already, in practice, completely conditioned, although no one was fully aware at that moment. Everything happens in a matter of seconds, in that chaotic start where each driver fights for position, where the margins are minimal and where any decision defines the rest of the race. Hamilton, trying to avoid an incident ahead, is forced to modify his line, loses inertia, becomes exposed, and there begins the sequence that changes everything. At that critical moment, he finds himself fighting wheel to wheel, entering one of the most technical areas of the circuit, and that is where contact occurs. It is not a spectacular blow, there are no obvious pieces flying, there is no clear image of disaster. But in modern Formula One, that is precisely the most dangerous thing. Because the most serious damages are no longer the visible ones, but those that directly affect the internal aerodynamic flow of the car. Hamilton manages to stay on the track, even maintaining position at that moment, which could lead one to think that he has come out relatively well. But within the team, the story is completely different. As the car continues to roll, the sensors begin to send data that does not fit the normal parameters. It is not a simple loss of rhythm due to traffic or tire temperature, it is something structural, something that directly affects the base performance of the car. And this is where one of the most revealing moments of the entire sequence comes in: radio communication. Without having to wait several laps, with no room for doubt, the engineers detect damage in two of the most critical areas of the car, the floor and the side pod. And the answer is immediate, cold, and definitive. There is nothing to do. This point is essential to understand the seriousness of the situation. We're not talking about a secondary part, we're talking about the core of the SF20SIX's aerodynamic performance. The ground is the element that generates most of the load in these cars, channeling the air at high speed under the car to create that suction effect that sticks it to the asphalt. If that surface is damaged, even minimally, that entire system collapses. At the same time, the side pod plays a key role in redirecting airflow towards the rear of the car. It not only affects downforce, but also the overall efficiency of the aerodynamic package. When both zones are compromised, what you have is not simply a slower car, but a car completely outside its optimal window of operation. And the hardest thing for Hamilton is that all this happens without him being able to do absolutely anything from the cockpit. You can try to adapt, change lines, manage the tires better, but when the problem is in the aerodynamic base of the car, the driver is completely limited. It's like trying to compete with a tool that has lost its fundamental precision. From that moment, although the race has just begun, the objective changes completely. It is no longer about fighting for real positions, but about surviving with a car that has lost an essential part of its performance. And all this, we insist, in a matter of seconds, on a first round that goes from being an opportunity to becoming a silent condemnation. This is the starting point for everything that will come later, because what the engineers have detected at that initial moment is not a specific problem. It is a constant loss that will continue throughout the race, lap after lap, with no possibility of recovery. From that moment on, what happens to Lewis Hamilton's car is not simply a loss of rhythm. It is a progressive technical degradation that the engineers had already anticipated from the first lap, but which on the track becomes increasingly evident as the turns go by. Because this is where you really understand the dimension of the problem. The SF26 was not only damaged, it was aerodynamically broken. The data begins to confirm it in a conclusive way. Ferrari tells Hamilton that he is losing between 10 and 15 points of downforce, a figure that may seem abstract, but is actually devastating in terms of pure performance. We are not talking about a small loss of efficiency, we are talking about a car that has stopped generating the load for which it was designed, which translates directly into constant tenths per lap, with no possibility of recovery. And the most critical thing is that this loss is neither linear nor stable. It affects each phase of driving differently. When braking, the car loses stability because it no longer has enough load to keep the front axle steady. In the medium and fast corner, the car simply cannot sustain the speed, forcing Hamilton to lift earlier than he should. And at the exit, traction becomes unpredictable because the airflow that feeds the diffuser is no longer clean or constant. This creates a vicious circle from which it is impossible to escape. Having no charge, the pilot cannot attack. By not being able to attack, he loses temperature in his tires. And by losing temperature, the grip drops even more. The entire car system starts working outside its ideal window. In addition, there is a key point that engineers understand perfectly and that often goes unnoticed. Damage to the floor not only reduces the load, but breaks the balance between the front and rear. This means that the car is no longer predictable. One turn can have extreme understeer and the next oversteer depending on how the air impacts the damaged areas. The side pod, for its part, further aggravates this situation. Being compromised, the airflow that should be guided towards the rear of the car arrives distorted, directly affecting the performance of the diffuser and the rear wing. In other words, the car not only loses charge, it loses overall efficiency. And this is where you understand why the engineers were so forceful from the beginning. It's not that they didn't want to try something, it's that they knew that there was no strategic tool to solve it. You can't change the floor in the pits, you can't mechanically adjust a structural aerodynamic problem, and you can't compensate for it with strategy because the loss is constant every lap. Hamilton, from within, is beginning to sense exactly what the data was already showing. A car that does not respond, that does not enter the curve as it should, that slides more than normal and that requires extra effort in each sector. It is a completely unequal fight, not against other drivers, but against their own car. And the hardest thing of all is that, while from the outside it may appear that you simply have no rhythm, the reality is much more complex. You are driving a car that has lost its aerodynamic identity, a car that no longer behaves as it was designed. This is the point where the race stops being a pure competition and becomes damage management, trying to minimize losses instead of maximizing results. Because when the technical foundation is compromised in this way, no talent, strategy, or perfect execution can reverse it. The outcome of all this does not come with spectacular abandon or with a dramatic image. It comes in a much quieter but even more forceful way. Because what Ferrari ends up revealing after the race is not only that the car was damaged, but that Lewis Hamilton's SF26 was competing throughout the test with a structural deficit that was impossible to compensate. And this is where the circle of what we saw on the track completely closes. The engineers confirmed that the loss of between 10 and 15 points of aerodynamic load was not only maintained, but conditioned absolutely every phase of the race, without any moment of recovery. This means that Hamilton never really had a window in which the car behaved normally again. There was no favorable stint, there was no strategy that would re-engage it, there was no degradation of others that would balance the situation. The problem was integrated into the DNA of the car from lap 1. But the most important thing that the engineers reveal is not only the magnitude of the loss, but what it implies on a technical level. The car operated completely outside its ideal aerodynamic map. This, in simple terms, means that all the pre-weekend simulations, setups, and adjustments became meaningless at the time of contact. The SF26 that Ferrari had prepared ceased to exist. And this explains something key that often generates confusion from the outside. Why a driver of Hamilton's level cannot simply adapt and remain competitive. The answer is clear, because he is not adapting to a difficult car. He is trying to drive a car that no longer responds to any predictable logic. The engineers also hint at another critical point. This type of damage not only affects immediate performance, but completely disrupts data correlation. Everything the team collects during the race is conditioned by a car that does not represent its true potential, which further complicates subsequent analysis and future development. In other words, the problem does not end when the checkered flag falls, it drags beyond the Grand Prix itself. And here is the big conclusion that Miami 2026 leaves. Current Formula One has taken aerodynamic dependence to such an extreme level that seemingly minor damage can turn a competitive car into one incapable of fighting, with no room for reaction, no solutions in the race, and no possibility of compensating for it with talent or strategy. What Ferrari engineers revealed is not just a specific diagnosis. It is a warning about the fragility of these cars. Because in this sport, it is no longer just the fastest who wins. The one who manages to stay within that perfect balance wins. And in Hamilton's case, that balance was broken, in a matter of seconds. The story of Lewis Hamilton in Miami 2026 is not defined by a mistake, nor by a bad strategy, nor even by a lack of rhythm. It is defined by something much deeper. The extreme fragility of a modern Formula One when its aerodynamic balance is broken. Because what Ferrari engineers revealed leaves no room for doubt. From the first round, the SF26 stopped being competitive not due to a combination of factors, but due to a single structural problem that conditioned absolutely everything else. Damage to the floor and side pod that, although invisible to the viewer, was enough to completely alter the behavior of the car and eliminate any real possibility of fighting under normal conditions. And here's the key that turns this case into something much bigger than a simple racing anecdote. In today's Formula One, performance doesn't just depend on having the best car, it depends on keeping it within an extremely narrow margin of perfection. When that margin is broken, there is no talent to save it, there is no strategy to compensate, there is no miracle possible. Hamilton didn't just lose lap time, he lost the foundation on which the performance of the entire car is built. What we saw in Miami is, in essence, a brutal technical lesson. These cars are designed to operate at the absolute limit, and any deviation, no matter how small, has exponential consequences. It is not a gradual loss, it is a collapse of the system. And that is why, when we hear engineers say, "there is nothing to do," it is not just another phrase, it is the reflection of an implacable reality in modern Formula One. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.